My name is Steve Staten, and I was asked recently to write a paper about the brief backstory of church hierarchy for an upcoming meeting in Dallas where members and leaders of the ICOC churches will convene for the idea of discussing our future together. And I look forward to those meetings called Forward by Faith, ICOC 3.0, Dreaming About the Future of Our Fellowship. Now, I did write a paper. It's a long paper, almost 20 pages, that is called Hierarchy Through the Ages, and hopefully you already have that. If you don't, you can email me, steve@bridginginternational.com. Now, it's important to start at Rome because Rome is where hierarchy is largely introduced into this discussion. You see before you the picture of the Roman Colosseum finished between 70 and 80 AD. It was about a 10-year project built on the backs of tens of thousands of Jewish slaves. In this amphitheater, this Colosseum, about 500,000 people were killed over the period of about 400 years. Rome represents might, power, persecution, control, subjection, and it's where a very important church existed in the early days. And what we're going to do is look at 10 flashcards where individuals tell us where things were at a certain point, and we're able to see changes and transitions about mindsets related to hierarchy. First is Clement. First Clement was written in 96 AD. The church in Corinth needed some help with the struggle they were having. As you read this 66 chapter letter, it represents the tonality about hierarchy as we see in the New Testament. No real big surprises there. Yet, a decade and a half later, Ignatius, writing in about 110 AD, he's a overseer in Antioch. He wrote 7 letters, and he wrote strong things like, let no man do anything connected with the church without the overseer. And he also said, be obedient to your overseer and contradict him in nothing. It's a fearful thing to contradict any such person. Ignatius creates hierarchy within the local congregation of overseer, elder, deacon, and then laity. That's pretty abrupt change. A couple of decades later, and by the way, Ignatius' model has not yet creeped very far into the church, but in Rome there's a major problem brought by Valentinus in 140 and Marcion or 144. And Justin Martyr is one of the primary writers taking on these heretical movements who are trying to have a stronghold in Rome so they can be the major influence of what Christianity is for the future. Irenaeus comes along a little bit later. This is about 140 to 180, and he writes representing all of the churches that are dealing with this because by this time the battles happened at Rome, and Rome's favor towards the Orthodox Church now became important for all the other churches. Matter of fact, he said it's a matter of necessity that every church should convene or agree with this church. He was talking about Rome. And I would agree with him on that, but not on his logic, because he said on the account of its preeminent authority. That introduces a problem, and for the first time, Rome is being promoted as the place that everybody should come in agreement with. Well, Irenaeus backs off of that because about a decade or so after he wrote that statement, Victor, the overseer of Rome, attempts to prevail on all Christianity on what the date of the resurrection, parentheses, Easter, should be celebrated. He was intolerant with the churches in the East who believed to do it a different way. And matter of fact, he was going to cut them off, and Irenaeus rebuked Victor. Next, we come along with Constantine, the emperor. He helped churches forge an efficient empire-wide organization. He steepened the hierarchy, furthering the power distance between members and leaders. He urged the church to be organized in dioceses similar to the regional districts. And the clergy, the clerics, had privileges that the common member of the church didn't have. Now, Gregory, 590 to 604 AD, serves as the premier leader of Rome. Matter of fact, he is the first true pope as we think of popes. He was a very creative, intelligent person, very organized individual. At one time, he'd been the mayor of Rome, came from a family of politicians and money. And he was creative. He wrote liturgies. His love of music is the reason why centuries later chants were performed that were eventually called the Gregorian chants out of honor of him. But Gregory, bringing all this political stuff from his heritage, brings it into the church and sees the church as various ranks of people being subject the lesser to the greater. There's different power and rank. And he cites creation and archangels and angels to justify his model. And then he goes out into the church and he tries to persuade everybody to embrace that, where it would all point back to Rome. And that every church would be subject to the apostolic see, which was Rome. And who's leading Rome? He is. The problem with his hierarchical model is it's more based on the Egyptian pyramid model than it really is on creation and nature and anything we see in the scriptures. Many people say the die was cast at this point, and this is the era that the Dark Ages began. Halfway between Leo and the Gregory and the Reformation is Leo IX. He's the icon of medieval Catholicism. He's a conformist at heart. He's a military leader as well. He tries to get the Normans to be subject to him through the use of military might. He's very uncompromising, similar to Victor. And the split that happened between the Eastern and Western churches in 1054 AD happened because of directions on his watch. Now we move to the Reformation. Martin Luther creates a paradox for us. On one hand, we have the coexistence of the priesthood of all believers with the top-down hierarchical structure of the German church. In other European churches were even more strict, under Zwingli and Calvin. The Anabaptists were persecuted by all of these major denominations because they were less authoritarian and focused more on the freedom of the local congregation. Christianity splintered and splintered over time because I believe of the authoritarian structures, these top-down structures, more than just over theological issues. The main challenger to all this centralized hierarchy that we see in each of these denominations that have preceded us is Thomas Campbell. There was a concept, and he was a Presbyterian minister in the early 1800s in the United States, called fencing the table. And this is where Presbyterians could only have communion if they had a metal token given to them by their elder. And the way you would receive it is the elder would find you worthy. And if you didn't belong to that particular Presbyterian sect, you might not actually be able to take communion. Well, Campbell, as a minister, he served communion to all the congregation and even Presbyterians from other different schisms and sects, which got him into trouble. And rather than to back down, he wrote a document called Declaration and Address in 1809. And it's against sectarianism, confessionalism, and really endorsing the idea of we're to be treating each other as Christians based on the scriptures alone and our individual character, proving that we've lived up to our own confession. Now, the challenge with this fantastic document, and I love it, as you can see, it came right after the period of America's Declaration of Independence, and in a sense, this is a Declaration of Independence, and it has a lot of American individualism in it, and it has little in it as to do for the future of how churches would function together, would practice brotherhood, would cooperate, would coalesce around missions, and would achieve great things together. That's largely missing from the document, and it's really missing from the Restoration movement for many, many decades. He did believe that we should be able to pick up where the apostles left off, and that was the basis of Restorationism, to skip back 1800 years in his case. Now, one thing about Campbell, he's misrepresented often. He did not believe that creeds and confessions were themselves bad if they were properly used. Here we come to Daniel Summer. In 1889 in Sand Creek, Illinois, he delivered an address and declaration, reversed wording from Campbell's document, before 5,000 people, which was a charter for anti-institutionalism, against cooperating in mission societies, any innovation, instrumental music, anything in church life, frankly, that he didn't like. He made a prophetic statement, though, that his speech is destined to pass into history, and the influence thereof will be doubtless felt until the close of time. Well, we are still feeling it, especially those from the Church of Christ heritage. We see the isolationism, the anti-structure, the anti-organizationing spirit, the hyper-autonomy. Matter of fact, Summer is so to receive credit for dividing our movement that when he thought he could contribute to the division between the independent Christian churches who practice instrumental music and the churches of Christ, he literally said, hallelujah. So we now have three different models on the continuum. Briefly, in the middle, We have what the apostles developed between 50, the Jerusalem Council, and 62, where the church was becoming decentralized. And the language is about brotherhood, there's equality, there's pillar churches. It is interdependency is practiced at a high level in the book of Acts, and you can see it in the epistles, 2 Corinthians, Romans 15. Churches are also independent, self-governing, self-responsible. Churches cooperate, they are liberating. It's an open system model that we see. But we see on the other end of the continuum, or on the far left end, is a centralized authority. Primacy as one church, top-down pyramid, directive, and so forth. And on the other end, largely because of Summer, it's aloof, separated, counterdependency, individualism, and there are many open systems. Now, where are we now today? Well, in the middle, as I said, there's an answerable, interdependent, independent, decentralized, integrated pillar church themes given us by the apostles. And we see the two extremes represented by Roman Catholicism, Lutheranism, Reformed on the left. Anglicans used to be on the left. They moved more to the right. We see Methodism and the Nazarenes. And on the right, we see the Mennonites. We see the mainline churches of Christ. We see the independent Christian churches. We see the Southern Baptist churches. Now, where are we? Where are we? I believe in the room that we'll meet in April in Dallas, we'll have people on both sides of the continuum who think about these matters differently, whose instincts are differently, and that's got to be okay. Let's not disparage each other, but let's find an idealized way that we can work together. And whatever model comes out of meetings that will take place in Dallas and beyond, I hope that we can do better than what we're doing now. We have a lot of resources. We have a great dream in front of us, but I think we can do better. Now, how to prepare for that conversation? I think we examine the Scriptures. Be serious, re-examining the Scriptures. Secondly, we examine ourselves. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. Also, I hope you will look at my paper. I identified 5 different movements that I think we can learn some things from. I came up with 4 categories of questions. Learning from other groups, growth, health, missions, and togetherness. And I'm sure you'll have your own questions. I wrote a series of papers last year that closely relates to this topic. If you don't have a copy of these, I'd be glad to send them to you. And also, I'm starting to do a workshop. The first one will be in Dallas in the 3rd week of May, called Legacies, the Great Schism of 1054 in its legacy, the Reformation in its legacy, and the Reformation in its legacy. And this is a perfect year to hold workshops like this because it is the 500th year of the anniversary of the Reformation this coming October. And I look forward to seeing all of you in Dallas. I want to thank those who supported me through private donations to write the paper and to do this video. Look forward to seeing you soon.